Adoptive son chooses his struggling biological parents over us, cutting ties and excluding us from his wedding after years of love, sacrifice, and support. This has been one of the most heartbreaking incidents for both my husband and me. We've been struggling to process this for the past few days. I'm hoping that expressing all of this may help me and also receive some suggestions on what steps I should take moving forward. My husband is 62 years old, and I'm 59. We find ourselves in a situation that is tearing our family apart and has damaged our relationship with our son. This will be a lengthy post, but I want to provide all the context so that all of you can understand the full picture. Our son, George, 27 male, was just around 2 years old when we welcomed him into our family. Our adoption journey began when we discovered that I was unable to conceive children. This was a difficult realization for both my husband and me. However, during a visit to meet with relatives, we received unexpected news about a child in need of a loving and stable home. It was heartbreaking to learn that George's biological parents were struggling with addiction and were unable to care for him. While we felt deep compassion for their situation and hoped for their recovery, we also felt overwhelming joy at the thought of providing George with the home and family he deserved. The adoption process was a lengthy one involving complex legal procedures and mountains of paperwork. After almost a year of navigating through these challenges, we were finally able to bring George into our home. Despite the closed nature of the adoption at his biological parents' request, we made sure to keep a letter and photo that they had left for George should he ever wish to learn about his biological roots. As a family, we were committed to ensuring that George grew up knowing his full story and roots, even as we welcomed him into our hearts as our precious baby boy. From the moment George entered our lives, we poured all our love and energy into raising him. It was truly a transformative experience, and he brought so much joy into our lives. Despite not having a lot of financial resources, we made sure he had everything he needed. We made it a point to attend every school play, cheer at every soccer game, and stay up countless nights helping with homework or comforting him after nightmares. We were there for him through every skinned knee, every achievement, every heartbreak, because he was the center of our universe. George excelled in school and earned admission to a prestigious college. We worked tirelessly to gather every penny we could to support him and ensure he could graduate without the burden of debt. To this day, we are filled with pride and joy seeing the kind, intelligent, and generous man that George has grown to be. Anyway, as George reached the age of his curiosity about his biological parents naturally grew. When he approached us with his questions, we handed him the letter and photo they had left for him. We made it clear to him that we would support his search for them if he ever decided to do so. At that time, we chose not to delve into the details of his bio-parents' addiction because we did not want to portray them in a negative light. Instead, we sensitively explained that their circumstances were not good enough to raise a child. George appeared to be content with the letter and our concise explanation, and we assumed the matter had been resolved, and that was that. The most joyful moment was when George met his future wife, Megan, 26, female, during his senior year, exciting everyone in our family. Megan's kindness and intelligence seemed to bring out the best in George, and their love for each other was evident. We warmly welcomed her into our family, as she truly felt like the daughter I had always hoped for. Overall, Megan and George were the ideal couple. Everything seemed great until about 6 months ago. George announced that he'd managed to track down and contact his biological parents. We were caught off guard, but were still supportive. We told him to be careful and to take things slowly, but we were happy he might get some closure and could even go as far as having a civil relationship. But what happened in the next few weeks was alarming, to say the least. George became obsessed with his bio-parents. He'd cancel plans with us to spend time with them. This became very apparent when he decided to hang out with his bio-parents on the 4th of July. Ever since he was a kid, we had this ritual of going fishing, but this time he wasn't here with us. What saddened and irked me the most was that he was doing our ritual with his other parents. When we did see him, all he could talk about was how cool they were, how they were finding themselves, and how they'd really turned their lives around. We learned that his biological parents were still struggling with addiction. Our relatives did some digging and discovered that they frequently got into fights with their neighbors. They had a history of going in and out of rehab, were unable to maintain steady employment, and resided in a small, dingy apartment. Despite this, George seemed oblivious to their struggles, only seeing an idealized version of them that he had constructed in his mind. After the announcement of the upcoming wedding, there was great excitement as George and Megan officially got engaged. Our joy knew no bounds, and we immediately offered to cover the wedding expenses, despite knowing it would put a strain on our finances. Our sons and daughter-in-law's happiness meant everything to us. They graciously accepted our offer, and together we began the intricate process of planning the wedding. Unexpectedly, around 2 months into the wedding planning, George revealed a shocking request. He expressed his desire for his biological parents to take on significant roles in the wedding ceremony. He wanted his biological father to walk him down the aisle, his biological mother to share the mother-son dance, and both of them to address the attendees during the reception. Not once did George ask our opinion or how we would feel about this new proposition. He was informing us. So we sat down and accepted his new plan. We were deeply hurt. Later, when we tried to talk about it to understand his reasoning, he became defensive. He accused us of trying to erase his heritage and pretend his real parents didn't exist. We assured him that wasn't the case at all, that we just wanted to be part of his special day too. George wouldn't budge. In fact, it got worse. He announced that he didn't want us to have any special roles in the wedding at all. We could attend as regular guests, but that was it. No walking down the aisle, no special dances, no speeches, nothing at all. He said he wanted the focus to be on his real family, and us participating in anything was just senseless. Despite the hurt it caused, my husband and I continued to ignore the pain. When George referred to his biological parents as his real parents, we were absolutely devastated by the situation. But we constantly reminded ourselves that George was grappling with difficult emotions, and that his behavior was likely just a passing phase. However, our hopes were shattered when George took a drastic step. He called us and expressed that he no longer wanted us to attend the wedding at all. He explained that our presence would be too complicated and might confuse the guests about who his real parents were. Instead, he suggested that we watch the ceremony through a live stream if we wished to participate. My husband and I were at a point of deep emotional pain. After a lengthy and heartfelt conversation, we made the difficult decision to retract our offer to financially support George's wedding. We communicated to George that if he felt uncomfortable with our presence or our financial contribution, we would not impose ourselves upon him. We also informed him that his biological parents were more than welcome to assume the responsibility for the wedding they were hosting. To our surprise, George's reaction was not one of disappointment, but rather of almost apparent relief. He expressed that it was probably for the best, and that his real parents had offered to cover all the expenses anyway. This revelation was both shocking and bewildering. I could feel my heart shattering as my son hung up on me. In the months that followed, my husband and I were dealing with a lot of grief, so we kind of avoided talking about the wedding. We heard from friends and family that the wedding planning was a bit of a mess. Vendors weren't getting paid on time, the venue was threatening to cancel, and the wedding planner was apparently telling the couple to lower their expectations for the products and consider changing the venue. On top of that, George's biological parents were making big promises that they couldn't live up to. It all sounded like real chaos. We were in a tough spot. Both of us wanted to jump in and fix everything for George, to show him how much we cared. But then we also felt like George needed to face the consequences of his choices. In the end, we decided to stay out of it, even though it deeply pained us. The only effort I made from my side was that I called Megan once, but when she didn't pick up my call either, I knew it was time to back off. It would be wrong if I said I didn't hope that my son changed his mind at the last moment. I prayed that he would at least let us be part of the wedding, even as some strangers sitting at the back. That is why, when our doorbell rang at 11 p.m., the night before the wedding, I dashed to open the door, but it was not who I was expecting. It was Megan. Megan was hysterical. She was inconsolable. When she finally calmed down a little bit, we got to know what had happened. George and his real parents told her that we were not willing to be part of the wedding if his bio parents were there. Also, we had sabotaged their wedding by canceling the funds for the venue at the moment because we could not bear their happiness. I could not believe that George, my son, whom I loved with my whole heart, said stuff like this about us. She was horrified by George's behavior and couldn't believe he treated us this way. She revealed that George's biological parents had essentially abandoned the wedding preparations, leaving everything in chaos. Most vendors hadn't been paid, the venue was canceling, and the whole thing was falling apart. When Megan discussed this with George, he made it seem like the villains were us and defended his bio parents by saying, how could they ever bring such a huge amount at the last moment, concealing the fact that they paid for almost nothing. After this whole conversation, even Megan was confused, used, and kept questioning him. Why would his parents, who raised him and put him through everything, leave on such a momentous occasion? It was a lucky coincidence that Megan had a chat with one of the guests invited, who was also a family friend of ours. They clarified everything, and as soon as Megan got the whole story, she decided to come to us crying. Megan also told us how aggressive George had become ever since he started hanging out with his bio parents. When things would go wrong, even the slightest bit, he would lash out and get frustrated. She also once caught him having a talk with his parents, where his bio mother was telling him how George needs to make sure that Megan always respects his opinions, and that's her duty as his wife. She kept ignoring all of this because she thought that this would pass, and that the man that she got engaged to was better than this. But this lie about us was the final straw for her when she realized how much she had been lied to in the past. Months, Megan knew she had to leave. Through her tears, Megan told us she decided to call off the wedding. She couldn't marry someone who could treat their family, their real family, with such disregard. She was also deeply troubled by George's apparent ease with lying to her about the situation. We comforted Megan as best we could. While part of us was proud of her for taking a moral stand, we were also devastated. We had loved Megan like a daughter, and now we were losing her too. We were also mourning the future we had envisioned: grandchildren, family holidays, and a growing family filled with love. Megan left after a few hours, determined to break the news to George and her own family. We sat in our quiet living room, holding each other and trying to process everything that had happened. As I already mentioned, it's been a week since that night. The wedding was canceled. We've heard through the grapevine that George is furious, blaming us for poisoning Megan against him. We also got to know that his biological parents had this whole speech about how we stole their child from them, and they never wanted us to have George. And that's why we broke off their son's wedding as an act of vengeance for their active involvement in the wedding. Not long after that, they disappeared again, leaving George to deal with the fallout of the canceled wedding on his own. We find ourselves in a state of complete sorrow. Our love for George transcends biology. He is and will always be our son. However, we are grappling with profound hurt as we struggle to understand his actions toward us. Despite our efforts to communicate with him, he did not respond to our calls or messages. We are nothing but tired of leaving endless voicemails. A part of me wonders whether everything would have been good if we had simply proceeded with paying for the wedding despite our emotional turmoil, solely for George's sake. On the other hand, there is a sense that we need to assert ourselves and make George aware of the consequences of his actions, and that we would not tolerate such disrespect. Here we are, turning to Reddit for support. Two parents shattered by the loss of our son and the future we had envisioned. We are left questioning our missteps. Did we unknowingly drive George away? Could we have handled the situation differently? AITA, for withdrawing our financial support? Should we have just paid for everything anyway? How do we move forward from here? We're at a loss, and could really use some outside perspective. Update 1. First of all, thank you all for your responses. I'm truly grateful for all the suggestions and bits of advice that everyone has given. I'm trying to read through everything and will respond when I can. After this whole incident, we are frequently checking up on Megan. The wedding breakup hit her very hard, but she has been very strong and resilient. She also informed us that she got multiple calls from George saying that whatever lies we have told her are just an act of revenge, and that we always manipulated him, wanting him to do things according to us. A lot of you have asked for more details about why Megan left George, so I'll try to clarify that here. From our conversation with Megan that night, and from what we've heard since, several factors led to her decision. First and foremost, Megan was deeply hurt that George had lied to her about our involvement in the wedding. He had told her that we chose not to be involved, painting us as the antagonists. Finding out the truth made her question George's honesty in other areas of their relationship. Megan herself comes from a close-knit family and places a high value on family relationships. She couldn't understand or accept how George could so easily disregard the parents who had raised him with love and care for over 2 decades. She had met us on so many occasions and could not fathom us abandoning our son on such a happy occasion. Megan disclosed some pretty alarming stuff about George's interactions with his biological parents. According to her, when they had newly met, George's bio-parents had been consistently pressuring George to approach us for additional funds under the guise of wedding preparations. This wasn't just a one-time request, it was a persistent effort that wore on George's mental health. But they were very clever with their manipulation. They would pressure and guilt-trip him into things one moment and then another. They would be back to their loving and caring disguise. When George showed any hesitation about asking us for more money, his biological parents would resort to emotional manipulation. They'd question his commitment to them, implying that if he truly cared, he wouldn't think twice about making these financial requests. This manipulative behavior placed George in an impossible position, torn between his desire to please his biological parents and his discomfort with constantly asking us for money. If all this was not enough, here comes some more. Their manipulation did not end with George. George's biological parents had deceived Megan and taken money from her. Despite being aware of their difficult circumstances, she had chosen to overlook the incident to avoid appearing petty, especially to someone so close to her future husband. Just 2 months before the wedding, George's biological mother contacted Megan, requesting financial assistance to book flight tickets for the wedding. Although caught off guard, Megan ended up lending them the money. Following the cancellation of the Megan reached out to George's biological parents for the borrowed money, but she has yet to receive a response. When she tried to discuss this with George, he reacted very nonchalantly, saying that this would just foster a better relationship between her and his bio mother. Megan observed the toll this was taking on George. She noted significant changes in his behavior, increased anxiety, trouble sleeping, and sudden mood swings. She recounted instances where she'd find George awake in the middle of the night, visibly distressed about financial matters and the fear of disappointing his biological parents. The situation escalated to the point where Megan overheard a particularly distressing phone call between George and his biological mother. The conversation was totally a guilt trip, where his bio mother kept suggesting that George valued his relationship with us more than with them. This level of manipulation deeply alarmed Megan. Despite her attempts to discuss these issues with George, he became defensive and refused to acknowledge the harmful dynamics at play. Megan expressed that watching the person she loved being emotionally manipulated in this way was one of the primary factors that led her to reconsider their relationship and ultimately the wedding itself. Amidst the whirlwind of wedding planning, which included dealing with unpaid vendors, an expensive venue, an annoyed wedding planner, and broken promises, Megan came to the realization that George might not be prepared for the financial obligations that come with marriage. She was particularly troubled by the fact that George chose to decline our offer to cover the wedding expenses in favor of relying on unreliable promises from his biological parents. Megan was deeply unsettled by George's apparent lack of consideration for ours and her emotions. She believed that even if George desired a relationship with his biological parents, his approach displayed a coldness that she had not previously observed in him. Despite clear evidence that George's biological parents were still struggling with addiction and reliability issues, George continued to idolize them. Megan was concerned about the impact this could have on their future, especially if they had children. She would not want some aggressive grandparents who are struggling with addiction to be around her kids in the future. The way George handled the entire situation, making unilateral decisions, refusing to communicate, and lashing out when challenged, made Megan worry about how he would handle conflicts in their marriage. Would his bio parents still be around, making wrong and idiotic decisions for him? And if yes, what position would she be in, where she is abandoned by her own husband? Ultimately, Megan felt that George's actions revealed a fundamental difference in their values, especially regarding family loyalty and honesty. She realized that perhaps they weren't as compatible as she had thought. Megan told us that while she still loved George, she couldn't move forward with the marriage given all these issues. She felt that canceling the wedding, while painful, was better than going through with it and potentially facing a painful divorce down the line. We do not know what to think at this point, to be honest. We are angry at George for the position he put Megan in, but at the same time, we also pity him since he was also manipulated into this situation and was forced to be at a point where he has to choose between his biological parents and adoptive parents. What my husband and I can agree on is that we are happy that Megan is out of this mess because she did not deserve to be in such a toxic environment. Update 2. Many of you have asked about George's childhood and if there were any signs of this behavior before. I'll try to address that here. Looking back in light of recent events, it became evident that George had always displayed a sensitive nature. His struggles with feelings of abandonment were apparent, despite our best efforts to provide him with a sense of security and affection. When he was younger, we took him to therapy to aid him in processing the complex emotions surrounding his adoption. The therapist recommended that we approach his adoption with openness from an early age, and we consistently emphasized how much we wanted him and the love we held for him. As a young child, George displayed a strong attachment to us, making it difficult for him to separate for even the smallest period of time. When we dropped him off at daycare, his crying episodes lasted longer than what is typical for children his age. Seeking professional help from his pediatrician and therapist, we assisted George in building feelings of security and confidence, which was a challenging and lengthy process. Academically, George excelled in elementary school, but struggled socially, showing hesitancy in making friends due to fear of rejection. To help him gain confidence, we encouraged his participation in clubs and sports teams, which gradually improved his social skills. Despite the progress, he continued to be more sensitive to perceived criticism and rejections compared to his peers. As a teenager, George went through a rebellious phase, but we always chalked it up to normal teenage angst. He would sometimes lash out, saying things like, "You're not my real parents," in the heat of arguments, but he always apologized afterward. We thought he had worked through those feelings. During this period, George developed a deep fascination with understanding his own personal identity. He delved into extensive online research on different personality types and invested significant time in figuring out where he belonged. His exploration extended to experimenting with various styles of dress and music, leading to noticeable changes in his appearance from week to week. While we encouraged and supported his journey of self-discovery, we were concerned about how quickly he'd abandon one identity for another. This was not a matter of concern then, because doesn't every child go through these phases, the rethinking, the transition, and the constant urge to know yourself, as well as everyone else, in a better manner? But now, in retrospect, we're just wondering what we could have changed to ensure that everything was okay today. There was also a period when George was about 16, when he became obsessed with the idea of finding his true self. He started questioning everything about his upbringing, including our parenting decisions. There were times when he also accused us of not understanding him and of trying to mold him into someone he wasn't. We were taken aback because we had always tried to support his individuality and interests. We encouraged George to explore his feelings in therapy, which he agreed to for a while. The therapist helped him work through some of his anger and confusion, and things seemed to improve. By the time he left for college, we thought he had worked through most of these issues. Looking back, maybe these were signs of the identity struggles that would surface later. But as I said earlier, at the time, it just seemed like normal teenage identity formation. George appeared to have moved past these concerns, excelling in college and seeming more comfortable with himself. Now, in light of recent events, we're reevaluating these memories. We're trying to understand if we missed any crucial signs or if there was more we could have done to help George feel secure in his identity and his place in our family. I hope this additional context helps. We're still trying to process everything and understand where we go from here. Thank you all for your insights and support. Update 3. Thank you all for your advice. Many of you have suggested family therapy, and we think that's a great idea, if George is willing, of course. We're going to give him some space for now, but we'll reach out in a few weeks to see if he's open to working through this together. We've researched several therapists in our area who specialize in adoption-related family issues and have experience with adult adoptees reconnecting with biological families. Some of you have also advised us to look into support groups for parents of estranged children. We'll definitely look into that. It helps to know we're not alone in this situation. We found a local group that meets weekly and plan to attend our first session next Thursday. Just knowing there are others out there who understand our pain has already provided some comfort. To those asking about Megan, we've been in touch with her regularly. She's doing okay, all things considered, though she's understandably still processing everything. She asked us if we'd be willing to stay in contact, and we said yes without hesitation. She's been a part of our family for years, and we care deeply about her well-being. 2 days ago, we had her over for dinner. It was bittersweet, lovely to see her, but a stark reminder of what we've all lost and might not ever have again. As for George's biological parents, we don't have much concrete information. From what we've heard through mutual acquaintances, they've fallen out of contact with George again. This pattern of appearing and disappearing seems to be a recurring theme with them. We're deeply worried about how George is coping with all of this, but he's still not responding to our attempts to reach out. We've left voicemails, sent texts, and even written a heartfelt letter. But so far, silence. We've recently learned some troubling information about George's current state. A colleague of George's reached out to us, expressing concern about his behavior at work. Apparently, George has been showing up late, missing deadlines, and snapping at coworkers, all completely out of character for him. There's worry that his job may be at risk if this continues. We discovered that George has been frequenting a local bar almost nightly. Now let me be clear, we are not stalking him. A family friend spotted him there several times, always alone and appearing despondent. This is particularly concerning, given the history of addiction in his biological family. We do not want him to go down the same path. Megan informed us that George has been making some concerning posts on social media, hinting at feelings of abandonment and betrayal. While he hasn't named names, the implication seems to be that he feels let down by everyone in his life. We've also learned that George has withdrawn a significant amount of money from his savings account. We're worried about what this might mean and hope he's not sending money to his biological parents or falling into some sort of financial trouble. A neighbor mentioned seeing unfamiliar cars parked outside George's apartment at odd hours. We're concerned about the company he might be keeping and hope he's not falling in with a bad crowd. We're taking things one day at a time, trying to balance giving George space with our desire to help him. Your comments and support have been a real comfort during this difficult time. We'll update if there are any significant developments. Thank you all again for your kindness and advice. It means more than you know to have this support during such a challenging time. Update 4. We finally got a call from George. After 1.5 weeks since the wedding cancellation, George called my husband. From what we could guess, he seemed hysterical. He was constantly crying and apologizing for everything that happened. We were right when we thought that he had fallen in with a bad crowd and started drinking. But luckily, he realized what he was doing and decided to call us. He accepted the fact that he had hurt us, and nothing that he would say would change what happened. But he was willing to change and get therapy so he could get better. He also cut all contact with his bio parents. But right before that, he made a call and told his bio mother very seriously that if they did not return Megan's money in the next 24 hours, he would file a police complaint. We confirmed with Megan that she had received the money in her bank account. We also told Megan about George's call, and she said that she still needs some time to recover from everything. Safe to say that the wedding is not happening anytime soon, but maybe that's for the better, since George will also need some time and space to get back to normalcy. In the meantime, we're focusing on self-care and healing. We've started seeing a therapist ourselves to work through our feelings of guilt, loss, and confusion. We're also trying to stay busy. I've taken up gardening. My husband has returned to his old hobby of woodworking. It helps to have something to focus on besides our worry for George. I cannot express in words how grateful I am for all the support and advice that I got here. The support group has also given me a better insight into everything that happened, and I feel like we're doing much better. Thank you, people. We are deeply thankful for your help.